My name is Andrea Weiss. I'm here with my film Bones of Contention. I love being at the Berlinale, and I love the Teddy Awards. They should be a model for the rest of the world, if only the rest of the world would catch up with Berlin.
Cuando se hundieron las formas puras, bajo el cri-cri de las margaritas, comprendí que me habían asesinado. Recorrieron los cafés y los cementerios y las iglesias. Abrieron los toneles y los armarios. Destrozaron 3 esqueletos para arrancar sus dientes de oro. Ya no me encontraron.
Ya no me encontraron. No me encontraron, no. No me encontraron.
Y no lo encontraron. Lo estuvieron buscando allí también, no lo encontraron. Que no lo encuentran.
Era un sistema político nacional católico y la sexualidad no se tocaba, es decir, aquí no existía la sexualidad. Con respecto a no tocarse ese tema, tampoco se tocaba el tema de si había gays en las prisiones. Había una ley de la República que se llamaba Ley de Vagos y Maleantes, y en esta ley no recogía la criminalización de la homosexualidad.
Welcome, Andrea Weiss, director of Bones of Contention, was screened this year at Berlinale. It's a film that explores the theme of the memory in Spain in general. I need to get closer to the table. This is Teddy. And in special, it focuses on the LGBT or queer community. And I did wonder, I mean, you're an American filmmaker. Did you find the subject of this film, or did the subject find you?
That's a good question, because I think in one way or another, all my films, the subjects find me, you know? And in this case, I was living in Barcelona. We were living in, my family, I was living with my partner and our daughter in Barcelona in 2011 and 12. And I used to just, wander through the ancient streets of Barcelona, and I stumbled upon a demonstration in the city center for historical memory.
Okay.
And this was a time when there were student strikes and there were worker strikes, and the unemployment was really high.
After the bank crisis, right?
And here were people out there on the street, and I found out they were out there every week demanding historical memory, which was such an interesting phrase anyway. And I was really drawn to them, because I think partly as an American we have no real understanding of history or interest in history. As a country, the United States in general is very forward-looking, not very much backwards-looking. And I was very impressed by them. So that was the first seed of the, very early seed of the idea. So I stumbled upon it. So I guess in that sense it found me, yeah.
And I mean, you quote a lot of poems from Federico García Lorca. So when did you wind up like combining or getting him into the movie too? So that, I mean, he's like a icon or a symbol figure for this like gay or queer movement. And how did you come up with that idea?
Well, he's kind of a symbol for the LGBT movement, but he's also the symbol for all the disappeared. He's the most famous disappeared in Spain, maybe anywhere in the world. So, so for me, and also I love his work, and so for me, he kind of knitted the different themes together. So yeah.
So you have been reading his poems before you got to this subject of memory in Spain?
I did. I've been reading, I love his work, but I never really thought of him in terms of, as a symbol for the disappeared or as a symbol for the LGBT movement, and until I started learning more about him. So I started going on a kind of journey, to discover more about him. And I knew that there were debates over whether to keep, in Spain, there are a lot of really heated debates over whether they should keep looking for his remains or whether they should leave him alone. So that also intrigued me, that a country so many decades later is debating the significance of finding someone's remains. I found it interesting.
What's interesting that one of his relatives that you interviewed as well, she was like quite clear, and she said like, no, he should like stay where his bones should stay where they are, and like others were just like really like begging that the bones were digged up. I mean, so how do you think about that?
There was a lawsuit in Spain. I guess it was 4 years ago now. I forget. Maybe more or less 4 years ago, about whether or not to continue looking for his remains. And because he was a symbol for looking for the remains of all the disappeared. And so she was on the other side of the lawsuit from some of these other people in my film. And I understand both sides, because in many cases, families don't have anything but their remains. Like the man, Emilio Silva, in my film, who talks about he just wanted to bury his grandfather next to his grandmother.
I remember this.
Right?
Passage.
But with Lorca, we have Lorca. We don't really need, I understand her point of view. We don't really need his bones. We have Lorca's work. And
he survives in his poetry.
He survives in his poetry, exactly. So but he's someone who's become a symbol for a lot of different perspectives, and people kind of claim him. So the LGBT movement claims him, the historical memory movement claims him, the Lorca family claims him. He's a contested symbol.
But what's not meant to be bad, I guess. I think like just the opposite is the case, right? I mean, this is like when they say on a memorial or like on a stone, like inscribed, "We are all Lorca." I mean, you can't get like a better feeling or like more power, right? I mean, if like the common heterosexual man or woman is like identifying with a queer icon too, right?
Yeah, I know, I agree with you, absolutely. And it was interesting when I interviewed each of the people in the film and they gave a different perspective. Afterwards, after each interview, I thought, oh, I agree with that person. And then I'd talk to someone else and I go, no, I'm not sure I agree with this person. I don't know. I mean, I felt like I wanted, that debate to come up somewhere in the film. I didn't want it to kind of take over the film, but I think it's important because what is the meaning of the bones? Why is the historical memory movement so focused on the literal bones? Because they're also a metaphor for the past. But I wanted to give each person their kind of platform to say how they felt and give it respect, because I kind of agree, even though they're contradictory, I kind of agree with all of them.
It's interesting you just like mentioned the bones again. I mean, I was raised Catholic as a Catholic young boy. So there's like this kind of like bones in the, I say reliquia? I don't know the English term, I'm so sorry. Like when you go in church and then they keep the bones of like holy people. Yeah. And this is something what I thought, like this is the only way in time I saw like bones. Not in a grave, but like somewhere. So, and I can understand like these bones have like a special meaning. Like, I mean, what you just like mentioned, I mean, to memorize the past, but also like finding a way into the future, right? I mean, this is what it is about too. I mean, from this point where we are right now, we will need to go away, and it should be for the better, right?
Yeah, it's a complicated symbol, yeah. Definitely, the bones.
You said that you lived for a while with your family in Barcelona. So did you see any changes that time already? Like, I mean, you have stayed for a while. So have been there magnificent changes concerning the laws, or the movement, the LGBT movement? Or you were just like busy with your research that you didn't have time to follow it like very close?
I didn't follow very closely what's going on. I mean, Barcelona in a way is very different from the rest of Spain. It has very progressive government. The rest of Spain has the right-wing government. So Barcelona is not really emblematic of the rest of Spain in many ways. Kind of like New York and kind of like Berlin. Berlin and the rest of Germany, You had a film in the festival once, Berlin is not in Germany, or some title like that, which I loved. But anyway, New York is not in the United States.
The city's quite cool, but the surrounding.
Anyway, Barcelona is very much like that. But I think in Germany, in Spain, I think they're very progressive attitudes around lesbian and gay and trans lifestyles. I mean, it was fascinating to me. One of the things I was really interested in is how quickly that happened, because it is a Catholic country. It was under fascism for so long. It missed Stonewall. It missed, what was going on in Berlin in the 70s. It missed so many things because of
The
fascism.
fashion was going on until the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, and then it really made up for a lost time, really, quickly. So I was really interested in that, I'd say. So I think it's quite progressive on LGBT issues, although the right wing is in government now, so who knows what's going to happen. It's never very stable, you just never know. But in terms of the historical memory movement, even with the more progressive government before the right wing came in, I mean, there's just been no interest on the part of the government, left, right, or center, doesn't matter. They do not want to, pick up the rug and look at what's under there. And so the historical memory movement took this all the way to the United Nations. The United Nations said Spain has to start accounting for what happened. The government doesn't want to deal with that at all.
So, I mean, this is what was like shocking to me when I saw your movie, to face once again the problem or the point that the community has to stand up for the rights by itself. So mostly you don't get help from the government, right? I mean, it's like quite hard. Like here in Germany, paragraph 175, same issue. It's like, what happened like in Spain? So, His Majesty got like people out of the prison, and they were just like, I forgot the English name. What is it called? Like they got an amnesty for if they were imprisoned and they.
Do they get reparations?
Yeah,
reparations.
And that's like, this is something. What didn't happen to the LGBT victims that were in prison? So they were kept in prison. Mm-hmm. So things like that. How could that happen? Did you understand something like while living there? Did you make friends that did tell you, oh, this could happen? That like other victims under the fascistic era were released from the prisons, and like LGBT people, like the queer community, had to stay, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Because no one was advocating for their release. They weren't considered political prisoners. Right. In essence, they were political prisoners, I think, in a way, but they were just thrown in as criminals. So no one was advocating for them to be released. They weren't organized. There was certainly no kind of, like the leftists had political parties that could negotiate. It was part of the negotiation of the transition. But no one advocated for them. So Anthony Ruiz, who's coming here for the premiere, who appears in my film, and Sylvia Reyes, both of them are coming here to Berlin for the premiere, and they'll talk about, they were in prison after Franco died. It's crazy.
He's the baker, right?
He's coming here, and Sylvia, the trans woman's coming they're both coming Wednesday. Yeah, so they were both in prison. Sylvia talks in the film about being in prison in 1979. Well, Franco died in 1975. No one was fighting for her to get out.
The two stories of these persons were like, I don't find the right words, because like the ones that like were punished, were tortured, and like he was raped in the prison. People, the most like incredible sentence he made, like, I am the one that should be a part of a better future. So he's fighting for the rights that like doesn't have kids, but that his kids and other kids that are queer and lesbian have like a better future. And this is like what I think.
This is why, what you say, this is exactly why he has this he's the head of this association for LGBT, basically demanding recognition in the historical memory of Spain for LGBT victims and survivors of Franco, because no one talks about it, no one knows about it, and he feels it's very important because this is it's funny, it's important for the future to know the past. And it's interesting when I think about my film in general, I think like just a couple of weeks or months ago, it was like this chapter of the past that nobody knew, and it was an important chapter, but it was in the past. But things have changed so quickly in the United States and also in the world that I think it's become the film's become something else. It's become like a cautionary tale about the future.
This is what
about the future. Not even. I mean, and I can't really believe this happened so quickly. And my film, I hope, is a tiny piece of resistance. I hope against what's happening right now.
So it's a quite nice point where you just like mentioned your film is a piece of resistance. So filmmaking is like a political act for you always, right? I assume.
Well, I'm a political person. You know, I see things in terms of political. I don't think I start out intentionally saying, okay, this film, I have no control over what happens to my film after I make it. Hopefully people will see it and be influenced and changed by it. So I can't really say it's a political act because I don't know if it's going to have, what impact it will have, if any. But I can't be other than who I am, you know, and I'm really interested in people like Anthony Ruiz, people who, just an individual in the world who is trying to do something. He's the sort of ordinary, regular person who's trying to do something quite extraordinary. And considering his background and how he was treated and how he never finished high school and how his whole life got derailed by what happened, you know, right before, you know, right when Spain should be coming out of fascism. Considering everything that happened to him, I think it's extraordinary that he's actually become, you know, an organizer and trying to help, you know, younger LGBT people. And so I'm really interested in, like, sort of so-called ordinary people who are doing really exceptional things and can be inspirational for other people. So I guess in that sense it's a political motivation, yeah.
But at the same time you could say, or I would say, like, I mean, this is like the humanistic ideas, right? I mean, what we are fighting for, what you are fighting for, what he's fighting for. So by having a very bad past, like what you maybe don't want to talk about, but they do, when this is like a first step of like getting a better future, I guess, not only for himself or for themselves, but also for the upcoming generations. So, I mean, but yeah, without like these humanistic ideas, I mean, I think this is like what all.
And I think it's also very important for young people to know that LGBT repression wasn't just like in the past. We're not just moving towards some kind of, you know, with each generation towards some kind of enlightenment. In the 20s, when Lorca lived, he lived in a relatively free and open,
liberal
society like Germany in the 20s, like in the Weimar Republic. I mean, the Spanish Republic was a real moment of openness and liberation. It can go the other way, and we're going the other way right now, you know?
Definitely.
So it's not like...
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Unfortunately. So I think it's really important for young people to understand that it's not just like, oh, those were the old dark days of the past, but now everything's fine, everything's great, we have LGBT rights, we have this and that.
We can lean back.
Because our rights are very precarious, and we have to be vigilant about them all the time.
You are a teacher of film as well, right, at the school. So, I mean, what kind of ideas do you teach to your? I mean, it's like probably you can't teach, but I mean, what kind of content is like important for you to give to the next generation? I mean, you are a filmmaker for how many years? For so many years. So, I mean.
Well, I have, you know, one thing wonderful about where I teach is I have a very, very international group of students. Mm-hmm. Many students from different parts of Africa and Asia and Latin America, very international. And they come to New York, and a lot of them want to go back to their home countries after they graduate and become a kind of voice for people who can't have a voice, you know, and where there's really not a filmmaking infrastructure that supports kind of social issue, documentary, radical perspectives and so on. So I already have a group of students who are very receptive to understanding about, you know, how film can be used for social change. And that's usually the group, a very diverse group of students, but they all have that kind of thing in common because I teach documentary. I don't teach, there are other people there who teach fiction, I teach documentary. Mm-hmm. People who come there want to do the kind of work that I'm doing and my colleagues are doing. So that's pretty much the framework, and we see films from all over the world, and they make films that I try to encourage them to make films you know, from what they know, you know, from the...
Tell their stories.
They come with amazing stories, each and every one of them. So I try to help them articulate their own voice as a filmmaker.
So film is a part as an enlightenment, I guess.
I hope so. That's the ideal.
Okay, one last question, Andrea. Are you working on a new project already? You don't have
This
to tell.
film, Bones of Contention, I finished on Friday. What's today? Friday, 1 week ago. So I have it literally 1 week ago. I uploaded it.
You have been in Spain too, right?
Yeah, I was in Madrid just last week, finishing the sound work. So, you know, I haven't had much time to think about a new project, but of course I always have a few projects on the back, what we call on the back burner, you know, on the back of the stove cooking. One film I actually started working on while I was working on Bones of Contention is a shorter piece about it's about Tempelhof, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when I was here last year at the Berlinale, I filmed secretly at Tempelhof because I got thrown out. I got thrown out, but it's really interesting to me that it became this welcoming center for refugees.
Okay.
Because my father flew the Berlin airlift.
Oh, wow.
So, and he's dead now, but I filmed some things with him when he was alive about filming the Berlin airlift, which I always found fascinating because my European family was all killed in the Holocaust. So I thought my father, 3 years after World War II ends, flies the Berlin airlift. What are you doing? What are you doing? And it didn't make sense to me. It never made sense to me. And my father would just say, well, it was the right thing to do. And you know, I noticed in the interviews with Angela Merkel, she uses that phrase. Like, nobody wants her to have the refugees in Tempelhof, but she says, well, it's the right thing to do. She uses the same phrase my father used. So it's interesting to me that this airport, built by Nazi slaves, the site where my father's plane landed for the Berlin airlift is now housing refugees.
A symbol for the separation from East and West Berlin, yeah?
But also the headquarters, you know, Berlin was the headquarters of the Nazis where it caused the biggest refugee crisis of the 20th century, is now the welcoming center for the 21st century. I find it fascinating. So I'm making a short film about that.
I'm very curious, Andrea. Thank you so much for this interview.